special location where you're at. You can call it open space, but you're near the Glen, which is our most, our best natural resource in all of Sparta, right? We want that preserved. You're talking about you're talking about Morris Lake, right, and Lower Glen Lake, and we have a reservoir there, and we have a pipeline there. And in prior days, we used to have sort of little villages throughout Sparta, little areas that developed just a little bit, right? So that they were their own little enclave because it was a summer resort town, right? As a matter of fact, I think the Lodge, we used to call this the Lodge. I think it used to be called Burnbrae Inn. And I think Arthur D. Crane, the originator of Lake Mohawk, was fabled to have eaten at this inn. Okay, so I think that's the heritage of it. But now it's a very rural suburb, and it's really misplaced in a way. I'm sure plenty of people are going to argue to have a multi-unit home there. We cherish our zoning here, and we cherish that this is an R2 now. So I really have to be clear, is this a D variance where you're changing the use? That's going to be very important, and I don't feel like we're clear right now on that. I know your planner came up and said, no, we're not, but then I heard that we potentially are. So I'm not clear on that part right now. Is there already a variance in place that makes this multifamily or not?
You said it was called the Lodge?
I think that was an anecdotal term for the past, 40 years.
Okay.
But before it went under private ownership, and it was kind of a temporary home for wayward college graduates and whomever else was around.
You have such a way with words.
Yeah, thank you. It was the stepping stone from your house to your real home. But before that, I think it was, right when Lake Mohawk was started, it was one of those little villages, again, where you had another lake and you had an inn, et cetera. But anyway, I just don't feel like I don't know what we're voting on, and I'm a little unclear about the plans. I think there's some discrepancies in the plans. I'd like to be more solid before we made.
Well, they'll be coming back, Jennifer, as we know, so we'll get a little bit more clarification.
Okay, and that's all the questions I have.
Chairman Kenneth Larry.
Just one, Mr. Hogan, if you know anything about the sales transaction on page 7 in the Sussex County Sheriff's Office, can you elaborate on that? If he's here, Mr. Hogan, yet?
As the engineer or planner?
Mr. Hogan, he was,
I'm the engineer.
oh,
Mr.
the other
Flynn is the
fellow
planner.
then, what was his name? The planner, I'm sorry.
What was your question?
On page 7, can you elaborate on the sales transaction at the
I
bottom?
can elaborate. The last owner was foreclosed on.
Foreclosed
And
on,
my
yeah.
client purchased this property at the sheriff's sale.
All right, thank you. Any other questions right now? If not, I'll open it to the
Hold on,
public.
I forgot Michael Steinberg. I apologize.
Michael, I'm sorry.
I have an easy
I
one
always
with both
forget you.
monitors in front of me here,
I apologize.
Okay, I'll try and take it easy here. Quick question for you on the max impervious coverage percentage on this one. So within the documents here, it references 15.5%, but I thought I heard 17.75%. Can you clarify which one it is?
So the proposed impervious coverage currently increases to 17.75%. In the initial communications with the town before the entire team was brought together, I believe the intent was to reduce the impervious coverage to 15.5. However, just with the size of the current structure and how we need to get to the parking area and to provide parking even just for the residents, it's really impossible to reduce the impervious coverage below the existing or even below the maximum limit.
Okay, so I guess just for record purposes and making sure everything's tied off, let's make sure that the documents are updated accordingly to reflect the 17.75. That's what the final number is going to be on there. In regards to the powder room dwelling, again. So is that only gonna be accessible by, we'll call it unit 4, or is it gonna be, like common use?
It is only accessible by Unit 4. It is part of Unit 4.
Okay. And then in regards to the remaining attic and basement levels on there, is there going to be common areas for people to access the remaining attic and basement, or will they have to go into specific units to access those areas?
I'll talk about the basement because that's straightforward. The utility meters are there, so that will have access. But there are no common storage areas or attic areas per se. Whatever there is for a specific unit. And I believe that applies only to, I'm going to say Unit 4, because that's where you have an extension that does not have enough height clearance. Previously, there were multiple walls constructed to create rooms, but we don't believe we can get any of that. So it's just going to be attic storage at that point,
So
only
attic
access by
storage would
4.
only go to unit 4 then?
Yeah.
And, okay, and then as far as basement storage and access, again, is that public or like, common, like where anybody could get down into that? Or is it, again, accessible only from one individual unit?
It is accessible to all, but that's why the utility meters are. There's no storage space per se in there. It's not tall enough for any kind of storage space.
Okay. That's it for me for questions.
Thank you.
I'll now open a hearing to the public for their comments and questions on this application. Please come forward. And if you're so kind, to try to keep your comments and questions to 5 minutes or so, so
Okay.
we can get everyone in here tonight with their
Sure.
questions. All right?
Sir,
Please
raise your
give
right
your
hand.
name and address to the secretary, and then our board attorney will swear you in.
Okay, sure. Name is Anthony Giardulo. Last name is spelled Giardullo. My address is 49 Glen Lake Road.
Anthony, do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth in proceedings before the board tonight? So
I-
help you God.
I do.
Go ahead, Anthony.
Thank you, Glenn.
So, after everyone's testimony and the presentation, I would just like to point out that the number of units of this dwelling doesn't matter. Granting a D variance will change the use of this property. The applicant's counsel mentioned that the number of kitchens and apartments the structure has, but I do know it was listed and sold as a single-family dwelling. I'm currently, I should have started with this, I'm currently the president of the Glen Lake Beach Association. And that beach sits right across from the lodge, as we refer to it. And there was a mention of a dumpster area with fencing. The applicant, no one had mentioned that this property backs up to the Sparta Glen, so I'm glad one of our board members did mention that. But there's no fencing that's going to be keeping bears out of dumpsters. And it also poses a safety hazard because it is across from the beach. So, the bears are going to be, swarming the beach area. I think that these changes will change the entire lake community. I've been on that lake for 30 years. I grew up on that lake. I believe that the lights will not only negatively affect the area surrounding it, but across the lake, which is where my house is. And I think, as mentioned, that this building does have a lot of history to it. It's included in Weird, New Jersey. It has, great historical roots. Thomas Edison has, supposedly stayed at this building when he was working on his Ogden baby. And turning this building into an apartment complex would pose a significant disturbance to the area.
And thank you, Anthony. Please give your name and address, sir, to the secretary, then our board
Sure.
attorney will swear you in.
My name is Glenn Thomas. I live at 2 Burnbrae Lane, up in the same community.
Tonight. So how many ends do you have in Glen?
I'm on one end, Glenn.
All right.
Don't hold it against
Glenn,
me.
raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth in proceedings before the board tonight? So help you God.
Yes, I do.
And Glenn, also if you keep it around 5 minutes or so.
Yep,
so
I'll keep
others-
it
Thank you,
short.
thank you.
Firstly, let me say that, I've had dealings with Louis, and he's he's a nice guy. And, you know, we would welcome him in to a single home to be our neighbor. But this multifamily property is, there's a story that goes behind it with the lodge. And we had all kinds of problems. It's a little tranquil community. Aside from what transpired at the lodge, there was a Megan's Law person living there. There were drug dealings going in and out. There was 30-foot bonfires that the fire department had to repeatedly come for. So we're scarred as a community. What we really want is a nice family moving into a single-family home and just being part of our community. And this seems to be taking us back, maybe not to the same place, certainly, but it's challenging our community again. I was the president of Lake Association for 11 years. I've been there 20 years, and I'm one of the newbies, as you can see by my neighbors. But we just hope that you do not allow this to become anything other than a single-family home, and let our community have its nice tranquility and be the setting that it should be. So that's all I had to say.
Before you go, you put some stuff on the record that I find a little confusing.
Yes.
You're referring to a lodge. What was the name of the lodge?
It was called the Glen Lake Lodge Hotel. This is,
Ah, they sat up all night thinking of that one, huh? Glen Lake Lodge Hotel?
yeah, but this is from a postcard back in the day. Must have been in the 20s or something like that. But
And the lodge that you're referring to is this main structure?
Yes.
That was before the board
Yes.
tonight?
yes,
And how long have you lived there?
20 years.
And you have any recollection as to how many apartments may have existed 20 years ago when you first moved in? Or should we wait until you're,
I mean, Andy's.
all right, we'll let Andy
the
do it.
guru.
I'm not spotting you, Glenn, so we'll let somebody else testify.
But, and I don't think it was a well-defined number, quite frankly. There was a lot of, vagueness to what was going on, so.
Okay, thanks, Glenn.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, please come forward. Sir, please give your name and address to the secretary, then our attorney will swear you in.
Yeah, how you doing? You've heard this one before. My name is Anthony Giardulo. I live at 33 Glen Lake Road. And that was my son before. That's why we, and,
Anthony, raise
right.
you, and even though your name already has been sworn.
Here we
in.
go.
Anthony, do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth proceeding
Yes,
before the board?
I
Time's
do.
up. You go ahead, Anthony.
Like my son said, he grew up there, on the lake 30 years because I moved here 30 years ago. So I lived there 30 years. Since the 30 years that I've been there, the lodge, at most, we've had two members. So we had the owner, and he paid a separate membership for a guest. So for 30 years, we collected two membership dues. So, making this a four-family, we're going to have to figure a way to make that, if that goes through, we need to collect dues for four families. We can't have the owner, Mr. Peralta, paying dues as, one member and having four families using the facilities, But I stepped up because you asked the question about, recollection of how many people have used it. And for 30 years, at most, it was always two.
Two individuals or two families, Anthony?
It was, Kerry Lane was the owner, him and his wife or girlfriend. And he had, another couple that lived there. It was basically two couples that were the main residents. And then when that second couple that he rented to moved away, that's when we started having the problems with the, wayward transients and all the problems. That's on record with the town. They all know about it. The cops know that.
Right,
but-
that's really got nothing to do with what the board's got to consider, but the board does have to get down to what the uses actually were if it was pre-existing non-conforming to perform some basis.
Right,
So
right.
that
I'm
was
just,
very
I'm
helpful.
just giving you the history of the building and basically, in the 30 years I've been there, that's what I've seen and that was it.
Thank you.
Uh,
Anyone else, please come forward. Seeing no one else, it's now closed to the public and back to the board. So, Mr. Berkendorf, I guess we'll have to carry this to the next meeting, since you have a
Absolutely.
lot of information to get back to us on.
Yeah, I just had a couple questions. There were a lot of references to the discrepancies. Were those specifically related to measurements, rooms, those types of things?
Yes.
Okay.
And other,
And David and Lindsay could comment on.
Yeah,
Okay.
I-
there were a
Yeah,
number
I
of
just, I
things
wanted to make
that I
note,
noted,
that's all.
but that's the start of it. Go ahead, Linz.
Yeah, well, the maximum lot coverage, building height, rear yard setback are not consistent across the 3 documents that were submitted. Also, the plans that we were given had 5 units, which was different than what was presented this evening. So if we could get the revised plans to review that, because I think that's a pretty big difference and big change in the review letters. That's what I had off the bat. David, did you have anything else?
Thank you,
I had
Lindsay.
some things, Mr. Chairman. Seems to me, Dan, that you ought to be able to get some property record cards or something, because right now, in looking at the architectural plans, it looks like there might have been 4 apartments, for lack of a better, but I'm not necessarily hearing that. And that's okay, we just got to figure it out. But, you know, there are different ways that you can establish pre-existing non-conforming uses. You can look for punch holes on the side of a building where the electric meters used to be. You can look at, you know, the kitchens are kind of a tip-off. If you have 5 kitchens, it's usually 5 apartments or 5 somethings,
I have something.
unless you got grandma tucked away in the basement. And I think the board should have some additional information. And can I just go on with this stuff? Because I got a whole list of things.
Please, Glenn, please.
It seems like, I think we're gonna
You
need.
sure you're not a planner or an engineer now? In the second life?
I happen
But
to be a planner.
No, I know.
That's-
I'm joking.
I'm unlicensed unlike her. I'm just not a
Please go
professional
ahead.
like her. I think we ought to have architectural renderings because some of the board members raised questions as to how and what it was going to look like. It was pretty hard to follow. I found, and I don't know, maybe it's just me, I found the architecturals kind of hard to follow. I would like a detail sheet, Dan, showing what siding is going to be used, where it's going to be put, so that the board knows as it's processing the application where the stuff is going. And Dave and Lindsay can certainly jump all over me on this one, but I had a lot of trouble following the architectural stuff. Dave and I just went through an application not unlike this in Newton, and it took the applicant, about 3 or 4 tries to actually get it so that the board could understand the questions that you guys down at that end were talking about. So I think you ought to be looking at that. My suggestion, quite frankly, is that between now and either the next hearing or the hearing after that, that maybe the applicant meet with David and Lindsay to kind of go through stuff. The board members can't really do that because you're in the middle of a hearing process. So you can't really discuss it out of the public's eye. But I don't have a problem with Dave and Lindsay kind of going through it to get it so that it's kind of just tight for the board
Yeah.
to do.
I'd
David,
greatly
Lindsay,
appreciate
you'll
that
be open to
opportunity.
doing that, correct?
Yeah, we could do that as Zoom or something.
Right.
I would suggest too for doing kind of like a unit breakdown of, you kind of started doing it with like the colors. That might be helpful on doing like a colorized floor plan where each unit's a color overlaid, and then also having a table explaining the number of bedrooms, bathrooms for each unit. That would be helpful. I would also just, I know David touched on it as well, submitting a landscape plan.
Yep, we will absolutely do that.
Awesome, yeah. I think that's all. Those are all.
Let me
my
help you a little bit while you're coming up for air. I think you really, that's what we were just talking about. I think you really got to tie down what it was when it first started,
Mhm.
what it was when it was thriving. All we were able to do, thanks to some of the adjoining property owners, was go back about 30 years. And this has a long history. I don't know whether it was a rooming house at first. I don't know, it's about 12,000 square feet if you add up all the floors, I guess, and stuff, right?
Did you guys contact the building department to see what
We
kind of
did,
permits?
we did an Oprah request, and I got resolutions, but the resolutions resulted in non-approvals. The resolutions that I did come up with, each one of them, and these were from the 90s, said or referenced a hotel. and that they were changing the use from a hotel to the proposed use, and they were denied. But I'll keep looking at it. I just,
I got a shortcut for you.
yeah,
buddy. You know Wayne McCabe?
no,
Do now.
okay.
He's the former Sussex County historian,
Historian.
and he's
Yes.
proud of it. And he has more postcards.
And
of Sussex
historians
County.
love talking about historic things.
He gets misty-eyed.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good, he'll know. He will know.
I think that might help.
Okay.
But the problem, I think, at least as I'm hearing up here, is that it's a tough application because it's really counterintuitive to what's going on up there. I mean, you have, as David said, Newton's main water site off Morris Lake. And Morris Lake is, I think, the highest and best classification that DEP has, or at least it was. I don't know whether it still is or not. And then you have this other lake that comes down that Glenn talked about. So I think you just got to get your arms around it so that we can kind of circle back and get that stuff, Dan.
Yep, understood. And there, just a point of reference is just, there was a dumpster enclosure that's included in the plans. And the dumpster would be enclosed, and that was certainly something.
And I put
Yeah.
bear-proofed.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Agreed.
In northern Jersey, nothing's bear-proof.
Yeah.
We all know that, bud. We all know that.
Thank you, Glenn.
I don't think that there's anything else, but I think if they meet with the board's folks,
Oh, sure, no, they said
It'll move
that'll
it
be
along.
great, and then when's the next meeting, Marissa? Is August 12th, I believe?
August 13th.
Will you have enough of time for the August
think-
13th, or we'll have to go into September?
Oh, there's no second meeting in August?
We only have,
One,
no, not in the summertime, Dan.
okay, I'm just asking.
can
I'd like to
ask all
try
you
not
want.
to move to September, but based on the concerns, we can try for the 13th, and if not, we'll have it
Okay.
moved. So we'll put it down on the 13th with no further notice.
we'll carry it to the 13th
Thank you.
without further notice. Sounds. Okay. Any other questions or comments before I open it to the public for any of their comments or questions on agendas, items not on tonight's agenda? Seeing no one, it's now back to the board. We'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Ayes, the ayes have it. We're now adjourned. I'd like to also thank all the board members for their comments and questions tonight, and especially I'd like to thank David and Lindsay for their detailed report.